In 2021, director Denis Villeneuve released the first part of his adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune. Despite the novel being labeled unadaptable for years, it was met with praise and was one of my favorite films of that year. But the story was not complete. Now that the second part is finally in theaters, I'm happy to report that Denis has truly done it. While not completely perfect, Dune Part 2 is an astonishing sci-fi epic that is thematically rich, sonically immersive, and such a wild spectacle to behold that it demands to be seen again and again on the biggest screen you can find. Dune Part 2 picks up right where the first film left off. Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, and his mother Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson, are now in the company of the Fremen, the indigenous people of the planet Arrakis. The Galactic Empire has for years pillaged the planet for spice, a precious resource that makes space travel possible. And Paul's father, Duke Leto, had been the latest in a long line of rulers given control of spice production on the planet by the Emperor. It was all a ruse, though. As a rival house, the Harkonnens soon launched a surprise attack with the help of the Emperor. Duke Leto was killed, the Atreides army defeated, and the Harkonnens took control of the planet. Paul and his mother barely escaped into the desert and have now joined up with the Fremen. Paul quickly sets out to prove himself to the Fremen, among whom there is a growing belief that he is a prophesied messiah meant to lead them to freedom and paradise. At the same time, a budding romance forms between himself and the Fremen Chani, played by Zendaya, who believes the messiah talk is not only false, but dangerous. His mother, whose Bene Gesserit religious order has spread such beliefs, fans the flames of fundamentalism among the Fremen and encourages Paul to embrace his destiny as their messiah. As Paul assimilates into Fremen culture, the push and pull between the two women in his life only gets more intense, as belief in him grows and the alluring nature of power beckons. I said in my review of Part 1 that Villeneuve is a master at creating spellbinding atmosphere, and that is even more apparent in Dune Part 2. The film is dripping with a near constant sense of dread, punctuated by brief moments of exhilarating excitement and bittersweet false hope. This is accomplished through his production design, score, sound design, and cinematography. While the desert has its own harshness, the halls of power that Villeneuve depicts here are highly brutalist, with sharp, angular lines that offer no relief. Their architecture also casts long, foreboding shadows that swallow his characters. These halls, toward which Paul is increasingly drawn, are unfeeling and inhumane. Hans Zimmer's unrelenting score is a huge aspect of Villeneuve's atmosphere. It is one of those scores that you feel in your bones. And when he decides to give us brief moments of relief, you feel it in your heart. Zimmer's theme for Paul and Chani, a soaring, heart-rending motif that accompanies their romance, elevates the tremendous chemistry between Chalamet and Zendaya. Its beautiful melody, punctuated by bursts of percussion, lends a truly epic quality to their romance, especially when combined with the sweeping vistas of the desert planet. The film's sound design works in concert with Zimmer's score to pack a gigantic punch, especially when seen in a theater with a great sound system. Masterfully crafted, immersive, and stunningly visceral, Villeneuve's images only feel as tactile as they do because of the inventive sound design. And so we get to those images, brilliantly crafted by cinematographer Greg Fraser. As Villeneuve said in a recent interview, the power of cinema lies in its images, and every single frame of Dune Part 2 is incredibly powerful. Exhilarating action sequences, sprawling landscapes, and one of the most stunning black and white sequences I've ever seen. The visual grandeur on display here is magical. Plus, as someone who adores slow-motion shots of characters walking like badasses, the film really spoke to me. Villeneuve is an incredible visual storyteller and has long been adept at capturing scale, evoking deep emotion with his compositions, and perhaps most importantly for this adaptation, conveying big, weird ideas wordlessly. He understands the power of negative space in the frame, using the harsh beauty of the desert expanse to make his characters feel tiny, or to show Paul as the terrifying, intoxicating figure that he is becoming. He also knows how powerful a close-up on an actor's face can be, and how much we can learn just from the reaction shots of his characters. Villeneuve uses those reaction shots of Lady Jessica and Chani in particular to great effect, and it is their faces that tell us the most about Paul's journey. Ferguson's performance as Jessica is the more showy of the two, as she fully transforms into a radical religious zealot, talking to her unborn child and serving up plenty of creepy line readings. She is the devil on Paul's shoulder throughout, driven by her fervent belief that he is the Messiah her order has been preparing for. Yet still, as Paul embraces this belief, we see her become more and more concerned by what he will do with that power. Zendaya as Chani is the beating heart of Dune Part 2, and the figure through which Villeneuve expresses its themes most clearly. Chani believes that the prophecy her fellow Fremen are getting so caught up in is not only a lie, but a tool for the galactic powers to control her people. As she says, this prophecy is how they enslave us. She is rightly wary of entrusting the liberation of her people to an outsider, especially from one of the galaxy's great houses, who have been pillaging their planet for years. For Paul, Chani represents a new path forward, turning away from the dark history of his lineage, living more closely with the natural world around him, and eschewing the powers he would wield if he gave in to religious fanaticism. His mother, on the other hand, represents the old path of domination over both the natural world and his fellow man. It's a choice between carrying on the sins of his ancestors or finally bending the arc of his own history toward justice. Frank Herbert was reportedly dismayed by readers' inability to see Paul as the tragic figure he was meant to be. As Paul marches toward his eventual heel turn, Zendaya's magnetic performance and Villeneuve's wise obsession with her face ensure that we do not make the same mistake. Paul is not meant to be a white savior, but a critique of that very trope. Dune Part 2 is a tragic tale about the terrible power religion can wield to control populations, a warning against blind faith in charismatic leaders, a grand metaphor for the destruction of our planet for the profit of the oil industry, and a commentary on the colonial subjugation of indigenous peoples around the world. Villeneuve conveys all of this in the best way he knows how, through image and sound. It's what makes Dune Part 2 such a powerful cinematic experience to witness in a movie theater. That being said, his dislike of dialogue, coupled with the gargantuan task of covering the amount of material he needed to cover, creates slight problems that prevent me from declaring the film a pure masterpiece. There's a couple of things here or there that could have been better fleshed out for the uninitiated. The third act suffers a tad from slight pacing issues, and certain characters could have been more fully realized. Plus, the most glaring issue is the lack of actors from Middle East or North African descent among the main cast, given how tied the Fremen are to Arab and Muslim cultures. Still, despite those issues, Dune Part 2 remains a shining example of the magic of the theatrical experience, and the power science fiction has to grapple with big ideas in a compelling manner. As the work of artists are increasingly devalued by the major studios, and the thinking that AI can replicate any of this has grown, Villeneuve has delivered a film that simply could not exist without the specific talent behind it. With tremendous performances from its cast and meticulous craftsmanship from those behind the scenes, Dune Part 2 is a towering cinematic achievement that also gives a general audience rich ideas to ponder. I'm giving Dune Part 2 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is currently out in theaters, and I would highly suggest experiencing it there.